Welcome to the Writer's Dream. We have a special edition of the Writer's Dream today. It's our 9th anniversary. But before we get into the goodies of our show, let me tell you where you can find us. The Writer's Dream is on YouTube. Just look for my name, Linda Maria Frank. Click on my picture and you'll see all my videos. There are about 100 interviews on there now with authors. We are also on Facebook. The name of the page is, guess what? The Writer's Dream. We are here at the LTV studio. Just look for Video on Demand and search for the Writer's Dream. So we're kind of all over the place. But today we are going to talk about how we got involved in doing the Writer's Dream. My guest today is Karen Bonnet, and Karen was right in on the ground floor. Karen is an author of a book called Whale of a Tale.
Whale Island and the Mysterious Poems.
Whale Island and the Mysterious Poems. We've been all over the whales.
That's my little quote when I ask kids to read the book, and I write, I hope you enjoy this whale of a tale.
Exactly, and she's also a literary consultant, a graphic designer. So she's into the book world. And so Karen, remember the old days, 9 years ago?
The old days, it seems like yesterday. The adventure of getting to know how to do the program here on LTV, training. We had to train before we came here and got involved in this doing the program. I remember training to be an interviewer, which I already knew how to do because I was doing that for the newspapers, and being interviewed as well, how to handle that, what comes with that. And also I had to be trained to be on the camera equipment.
Yes,
that
was the
fun.
Most fun part.
I thought it was fun.
I actually like that better, and I never expected that I would end up being the host on the show, because we had a host, Dina Santarelli, another author. She was the original host.
Yes.
But let me tell you how I first found out about the show. I was doing an author day in Riverhead Library, and it was raining and windy. It was a horrible day. And so the only people in the library were the authors. So we were sitting around talking with each other, and the librarian came in and she said, there's a gentleman here who would like to talk to you about a TV show. So he came in and he explained that he had a connection to a studio in East Hampton, and he wanted to do a show about authors and writers, and anybody who was interested, he gave a phone number. So I called. And he actually didn't have a connection with the studio. He had done some work here, but he didn't have the kind of connection that would enable us to do the show. But he brought us here. Remember that day?
I do remember that.
And so we found out what it was that we had to do, and we had to do a full day of training, which was really great.
Yes.
It was Mike Tremblay at the time, and they taught us all the things that you talked about, and we actually had to do a mock interview. I don't remember what we talked about.
I don't remember.
Genevieve Lee, who was my first director,
yes.
she was also
She was
here.
wonderful as a director.
And then she absconded to Florida, so I had to go through another bunch of directors, and now we have Suzanne Silva, who is the director now. So do you remember the first interview that you did?
I remember doing quite a few interviews, but the ones I remember the most was with Jack Bolello, actually. It was a fun interview. He's an author and his book name I can't recall now. If you want to bring that
up. The Bonds of War?
The Bonds of War.
Was it that one, or was it Heart of a Lion?
It was the Heart of a Lion.
Yeah.
It was the Heart of a Lion. And while it was a great interview, because Jack is fun to talk to. He has a lot of knowledge, and he's a fun person. He has a lot to say. And so it just, that whole time of the interview went by so quickly. We both enjoyed ourselves, and it was just a great interview, I thought. And then the other one was with Beth Rowe, who is a friend of mine and a storyteller. And you were with me in that interview.
Right.
We kind of had a give and take on, becoming a storyteller and her background. She's also a retired French teacher, and she also narrates for books. She did my book, my audio book, which is through ACX.
Right.
So that was a very different experience as well. And I mean, there was others, but I just seem to, I don't know why those two hit me
Right. Well, there
You
are
know.
always interviews that you remember that, as being particularly interesting.
Yes.
Which brings us to really what I like to talk about in this show, and that's how to do a good interview, how to be a good guest on an interview show.
Right.
Because there aren't too many people who are watching this show who would be interested in producing a show, although there may be. If you're interested in producing the show, then obviously go on the LTV website and you'll be able to find out how to go about doing that, because it really is a very rewarding experience, and it's a great way to get out on any message that you want. Of course, guests who come on my show, their message is their book. They want to sell their book. So I'd like to really talk about, and you brought up a few things, I'd like to talk about how to do a good interview and how to use it. So first of all, people want to know what's going on in the brain that writes the book.
Right.
They love those stories about how you came up with the ideas and what your passions are. And obviously, when you talked about Jack's interviews, you talked about his passion for history.
Yeah.
And another person who's going to be on the next show with Jack is Joe Satriano, and he wrote a book about his experience with his wife's battle with cancer.
Right.
And so with his interview, the thing that struck me was the passion that he had for the topic and for getting the message out, and for his foundation, which raises money.
Right.
So passion to me is the key word for an interview.
Yeah.
You have to
bringing in the emotion, getting the emotion out. Like even in your characters, your book, you want characters in your book. You want people to have that emotional connection to at least one of your characters.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
important.
Exactly. And I particularly like for people to tell anecdotes, because every writer takes a journey. And that's one of my questions is tell us about, first I say tell us about your book.
Yeah.
And then if you haven't prepared for that question, that is like the most
very
important
broad
question. Yeah, I was talking to a marketer the other day, and she said, well, what is your message? And and she stopped me dead.
Yeah.
And
Think about that.
Because I need to memorize my elevator pitch.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
And I mean, I can say that, basically with my books, I call them Nancy Drew meets CSI. I want the people who read the books to have fun with the books.
Of course.
And I want them to learn something, because I can't help it. I'm a teacher.
Right. Yeah.
And so I want them to learn something. But I think about the people who write nonfiction. Fiction, usually you come up with a story and there's passion involved in that.
But you still have to do research with fiction, even though nonfiction, you have to do research and get your facts straight. I always say with fiction, if you have anything like a piece of land you're talking about, like in my book, the Cape Cod, or even all the different animals that I have in my book, I had to do research on all those animals, even though it's a fiction book. So that's...
Well, that's what makes a book interesting, and is the research that goes into it. In fact, some people, one of the questions that is usually asked in an interview is, what do you do with writer's block? And my answer to that is, if you have writer's block, start researching the idea that you have. Even if you're telling a little romance in a small town, pick a small town, any place in America that fits your, if it's on Cape Cod or it's in the deep South or wherever it is, or the Southwest, pick a town and then research it and come up with the background of it. And that will give you ideas to move on with your story.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I mean, that's the importance of research. But I also think that, I'm sure we've all had these, what was the best part of writing? What's the best part of writing for you?
For me, it was just, I loved sitting down and just ideas would, well, I knew, I have a lot of experience, and we use our backgrounds, we use our past experiences, we use the books we've read, our dreams, and all these other things that go into the ideas of a book. But to me, I just loved sitting there and writing. And then all of a sudden, some things would pop into my head for the next part of the book. To me, the writing part was the most fun. Much more fun than marketing.
Marketing
or
is
promoting.
The worst. Absolutely. I mean, publishing, there's so many different ways you can do it. But writing, for most most authors will say that the
Yeah.
writing was the best
That's
part.
the best part.
And it's the fun part.
Yes.
It's really, I think it's a form of art where your whole being can come out.
Exactly.
And I mean, if you're painting a picture, you're painting a picture of something else.
Right.
Or somebody else. If you're, same thing with sculpture, but with writing, it's what's in your head, what's in your brain.
I remember one thing that helped me a lot, one of the things. I read a book years ago. I was an avid reader, and I still am, but I read a book called Bonnet the cat. I was 10 years old. And what struck me in this book was the little girl in the book could communicate with a cat. She could talk to the cat. And you know, of course, that's for a children's
Something
book.
wrong with talking to cats? I talk to my cats all the time.
She could understand him, he could understand her.
The cat talked back, okay.
And it was,
I'm not
yes,
there yet.
yeah, the cat talked back. And I loved that. I loved that through the book, that she could talk to this animal. That's why in my book I have a whale that when the children find these whale bones, these mysterious whale bones, and they hold them, they're able to understand some of the animals on Whale Island. So, and I had to put that aspect of it into my book because I loved so much the fact that this little girl could talk to an animal. So.
Yeah, and speaking of marketing, you and I are both involved. Our audience is young readers of various ages. Mm-hmm. And we're involved in doing book events at schools and book fairs mm-hmm. and whatnot. And I think one of the most rewarding things is when a child comes up to you and is fascinated by the blurb on the back of the book.
Or the book
First
cover.
thing they do is look for pictures.
Yeah, and the book cover.
After they give up on
does.
that,
Yeah, right.
then they will read the blurb, and then if you go back to the same place the following year and you get a child who's read your book and said, "Oh, I love another book. I really love that book."
Yeah, that's so rewarding. It makes you feel so good when a kid comes up to you and says, "I read your book last time. I loved it." That's a great, rewarding feeling for an author.
Yeah, because I think that when you start writing, because let's face it, most people who write books are not professional writers. They didn't set out to write the great bestseller. Right. Mm-hmm. They had some other profession.
Look at J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
but they set out to do something else, and then along the way they got an idea for a book. Yeah. And one of my favorite authors is Diana Gabaldon, who wrote the Outlander series.
Oh, I loved that book.
And
the Outlander.
And she is a scientist. She is a biologist. She has, I think, it's 2 or 3 advanced degrees in biology. Mm-hmm. And this is a really interesting story of how somebody who had nothing to do with writing got bestsellers.
She probably didn't even know she had that talent.
Bestsellers. But what it was she wrote a computer program for analyzing biological data. Mm-hmm. I mean, how much more dry can you get?
Yeah.
But she had to write a newsletter to update the users for this program. So she had a publisher. Mm-hmm. And she had a good relationship with the publisher. And she said, I've always wanted to write a novel, and I've written this practice novel. Mm-hmm. What is practice novel? And he said, well, let me read it. Oh, no, I'm not. Let me read it. All right. He reads it, and he gets back to her, and he says, this is dynamite.
She didn't think so, that she didn't have confidence in it.
I don't know, but they published it in 8 books later.
And then they have a TV show on it as well.
1,000 million jillion copies later in so many languages. And I mean, talk about a shift, right?
Yes.
A complete shift.
Yes.
And this is what most of your authors are. And so, you want to know from these authors, where did you get the idea? What was your journey?
I get that from kids a lot. Where do you get these ideas? How do you get the ideas?
I do too. Yeah, because a lot of the kids that you talk to are interested in writing themselves, and they want to know where the ideas come from.
Yes.
Where do your ideas come from? Besides Carbona the cat.
Besides Carbona the cat, I used to go to, when I was a kid, we used to go to with my family and my cousins, there was a lot of us, to a bungalow colony in Keansburg, New Jersey, it was called, and it was a block away from the beach. And we would live at the beach. It was torture to get out of the water. So I had wonderful, wonderful experiences from my youth from that. Mm-hmm. So of course I have a nautical theme in my book, and I have all these different kind of animals that are in the book. As
the seaside community.
it was a seaside community. Right. And, I thought it was so important for, in my book to marry the thought of communicating with animals and taking care of our animals in our environment so that they still flourish and that they don't become extinct. So it's just, and being able to overcome fears, like there's one character who has some fears, Katie, and she learns along the way that it's okay to be afraid. You can be afraid, and there's ways to overcome it, and you learn through overcoming
that's a key to, I don't know about other books, but it's a key to children's or young readers' books, is that your characters have to have a conflict other than the plot.
Right.
They have to have some personal conflict, because you want the readers to empathize with your main character and to like them.
Right.
I mean,
that's very important to do that.
Yeah. With young readers, I think with any books, if you love the character, the book is going to become
popular.
Popular.
Even as an adult, if I read a book that I don't really, have a connection to any of the characters, I don't love the book. Unless the plot is so wonderful, but
or interesting,
it's just so important to have a connection with the character, a character at least.
Exactly. So basically, if you're being interviewed, you should be well prepared. Hopefully, you will get from the interviewer a list of questions so that you can prepare.
That's what I always did when I did the show. I always put together a bunch of questions and sent it to them, because it makes the interviewee, I think, a little bit easier knowing what the questions are going to be. And then they can go over them and the answers in their head before they get onto the show.
And come to the interview with the idea that you're going to find out where your interview is going to be aired, how you get access to it, whether you can get a DVD, whether you can get a digital file, is it archived, and that kind of thing. And also memorize your elevator pitch, which is your main message. Make it exciting. It's 2 or 3 sentences, but
not too long.
Draw them in. I mean, if you're writing a nonfiction book, you have to say, I can change your life with this book. Even if it's how to use I don't know
how to change my life.
Stilson wrench. I don't know. Tools. But it's got to be something that's going to grab them. And then the next part of this is really how can you use this interview? And we'll get into that. But before I do that, I would really like to talk about what do you tell the interviewer? What advice would you give somebody? Suppose somebody is going to do a show here at LTV and they're going to be the interviewer. What advice would you give them?
They're going to be interviewed?
The interviewer. You're going to be like you and me. Interviewer.
In other words, I'm going to interview you, say.
Yes. What advice would you give the person? What would they have to learn to be a good interviewer?
Well, they would have to learn to, first of all, have the right questions to ask, and maybe get the person to draw them out. Ask them questions that are interesting to them so that they'll want to keep talking. You've done so many interviews. What do you think would be the thing
I try to get them to tell personal stories. I try, my first question is always, tell me about your book. And if it's too much plot and character, then I get into what was your journey? What was it like? What was your favorite part? Do you have any funny stories or tragic stories?
People connect to that, to the personal.
Yeah.
People like to hear the personal.
So you have to learn how to get to that person and have them, expose themselves more or less.
Get to know them. Right.
Yeah. Expose the inner writer, so to speak. And because it's deadly if you're doing an interview and the person you're interviewing doesn't say anything.
Yes.
They don't have a lot to say.
Time ticks by very slowly.
I had an experience, this is a sort of funny story. I had a woman come and I sent her the questions. She memorized the questions and the answers she was going to give. And when I started interviewing her, I didn't ask her the first question. She froze. I saw it on her face, so I answered the question for her. I didn't want to start it all over again because she'd be twice as nervous. So I answered the question for her, and then I went to the next question. And by the time I got to the third question,
that probably relaxed her. And so
she was all right with it. But don't memorize. Try to really
because pretty much your book. So if you have an idea of the questions and you can draw the person out enough, if you have the right questions, you can. That person knows their book better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So.
See, I stick to main themes. I stick to plot. I just stick to what was your writer's journey like? What's the plot of the book? What are the characters like? Where did you get the characters?
Right.
What was your research like? And what are you doing to market it? And what are you going to do next?
Yeah, marketing.
And basically, if you get somebody who's really into their book, you're lucky if you cram that into a half an hour.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so marketing.
Marketing. Marketing is what's the hardest part. That's the most time consuming. And if you're someone like me who also had a job, and I would at that time when I was trying to market my book, I also was doing I had a business of my own, and I have a family and everything else. Marketing takes time, and you need a lot of time for that because that's what takes the longest. So marketing, there's so many ways to market. Here, I'm just going to read what I wrote here about marketing. And I used to be in public relations, so I used to have to do a lot of marketing. Here, marketing. You can market through social media, publicity through news publications. There's something called video socials, which is a great way to, you put in a 2-minute video, and then there's a video trailer that you can do on your book. There's getting your articles, if you can get them, have an editor from a magazine review your book or a newspaper to get it into those publications as well. It's not always easy. Going to the libraries and see if you can do some talks. Maybe you can give your book to the librarian. They usually will take them. Remember, we used to go to different libraries and they'll take your book and,
God knows what happens.
Doing talks and right.
I know.
I did talks in schools, because that's my audience, children. So there's just so many ways to market and just getting the word out there.
Right. It's good to start local. For instance, your local newspapers, your town newspaper is hungry for news.
Yeah.
So you have to approach them with a story. Try to get an angle. Like, for instance, yours is easy on Long Island because it has a nautical theme to it.
Yeah.
So local is good. You could try local TV, but it all depends on the station. Some stations just cover really pretty much the news, but if you have a local access TV show, do something like this.
Right.
Or find out if there's a show on local TV who's willing to interview you.
Right.
There are several places on the internet where you could do interviews. For instance, there's the author show.
Right.
They'll do your first interview for
Yes.
free. If you want them to promote it, of course, there's always charges. There's another website, which I don't want to waste time looking for it because I'm always losing things. Of course, social media. I would suggest before you even publish the book to get a Facebook page to talk about
Yes,
your
the
book.
Facebook page is very important. Your book, put your book on there.
Goodreads.
Goodreads.
And there are myriad websites who will put up your ebook or your paper book. Most people go on Amazon. There's a lot of competition on Amazon, so you don't really know how good Amazon is going to be to you.
Yeah.
Making an ebook and an audiobook, to my way of thinking, is essential, especially with what's going on now with the pandemic, where people are not buying a paperback book.
Yeah.
So there is a website called acx.com where you can
Do your audiobook.
do an audiobook and just follow the instructions. It's very easy. And ebooks, there are also, besides going on Kindle Direct Publishing, there are also different programs where you can make your own ebook, and then you have to locate websites that'll carry your ebook. And there are so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It's
exhausting.
just a matter of researching.
Yeah,
spending the time.
I find that exhausting, not because it's such hard work, but because there are so many avenues, and you have to look into them all to see which one best fits you.
Right, exactly.
But try to get a local bookstore once they open again to let you do a book talk. Your local library should allow you to do a book talk. You pay their taxes.
Yes, they usually do. And the local newspaper editor will usually, most times, will put your article in.
And the bottom line is you have to, when you write a book and publish it and put it out there, you have to decide what you want out of it. Do you want a bestseller? Do you want just the idea that you have published a book and you have this book in
Right.
your hand? Do you
Yeah.
want to educate with it?
Yeah. What are your goals?
What do you want out of it? And
Mhm.
that will really kind of narrow down how you market
Right.
it. So
Right.
it's been an interesting 9 years.
Yes, 9 years went by
Met
very
a lot
quickly.
of interesting people. Yes, it went very quickly. A lot of interesting people, a lot of interesting authors who have given me and hopefully the viewers a lot of good ideas.
Yes.
And I know, Karen, you're on the way to doing a second edition. You want to tell you
Yes.
how you're going to change your book?
I'm going to do a second edition to my book. What I'm going to do is add some fun facts on whales. For instance, I love humpback whales. Obviously, I have a humpback whale in my book. And I'm going to put these fun facts and other bits of interesting information about some of the animals in my book in some of the chapters. And I'm going to republish it through there's a site,
Kindle Direct
Publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did that with 2 of my books where I called them author's notes. And what I did after every chapter was I added some material on how I did the research, some extra facts,
Right.
lesson plans, activities.
Okay.
So I enhanced the book that way
Right.
and tried to revitalize it. So because you
Exactly.
have to keep revitalizing.
Yeah.
But we've
That's
just
okay.
about run out of time. So I hope that you've all experienced authorship through us and that it's been helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.